They don't belong here. The whispered words hung in the air as Elise Johnson stood in her simple cardigan, ignored by the snobbish jewelry store staff. But what these judgmental employees didn't know was about to change everything. How could they possibly have guessed that this simple woman they deemed unworthy of their attention was actually worth billions? What happens when someone is judged solely by their appearance rather than their character? And what would you do if you were in Elise's shoes? When Elise finally revealed, "I don't require a financial advisor to make my purchasing decisions," the entire store fell silent. But was it already too late for those who had shown their true colors? To find out how this powerful story unfolds, make sure you subscribe to our channel right now for more incredible stories that will leave you speechless. Elise Johnson stood outside Lumina Jewelers, her reflection barely visible in the gleaming glass storefront. She adjusted her simple cotton cardigan and touched the small gold band on her left hand, the only piece of jewelry she regularly wore. Today would have been her and Marcus's 25th wedding anniversary. She'd promised him before he passed that she would finally buy herself something extravagant to mark the occasion. "I don't need fancy things, Marcus," she had told him as he lay in the hospital bed 6 months ago. "I know you don't need them, Ellie," he'd replied with that warm smile that had first captured her heart at Howard University. "But sometimes it's okay to want something beautiful just because it brings you joy." Elise took a deep breath. The store's reputation preceded it. Lumina was the most prestigious jeweler in the city, catering to celebrities, old money families, and the nouveau riche tech executives who were increasingly populating the area. She'd chosen it because Marcus had always said when they'd made it, he'd buy her something from there. They'd certainly made it, but Marcus hadn't lived to fulfill that particular promise. Through the window, Elise could see elegantly dressed sales associates helping equally elegant customers. Display cases gleamed under perfectly positioned lighting, making diamonds throw rainbows and gold shine like captured sunlight. The opulence was intimidating, but Elise squared her shoulders. She was here for Marcus. As she pushed open the heavy glass door, a small chime announced her entrance. The sound seemed to float through the hushed atmosphere, where conversations were conducted in respectful murmurs and the occasional delighted gasp as some bauble caught a customer's eye. 2 associates stood near the entrance. The woman, tall and blonde with razor-sharp cheekbones and an equally sharp silver pantsuit, glanced at Elise and quickly returned to arranging a display. The man, impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, gave her a once-over and seemingly dismissed her in the same moment. Elise touched her simple twisted locks, neatly pinned back in a conservative style. She had deliberately dressed down today, comfortable slacks, sensible shoes, and her favorite cardigan. Marcus had always appreciated her lack of pretension, even after Johnson Tech went public and their net worth had soared into the billions. "You never forgot where we came from," he told her proudly at their last company gala, where she'd worn a simple black dress while other executives' wives dripped with jewelry and designer labels. Now, she stepped further into the sanctum of luxury, determined to honor her promise. She knew exactly what she wanted, something special, something meaningful. Something Marcus would have chosen for her himself. The dismissive glances didn't surprise her. She'd experienced them before, even when Marcus was alive. It was amazing how invisible a black woman could be made to feel, regardless of her accomplishments or means, when she didn't fit a certain expected image. But today wasn't about proving anything to anyone. It was about keeping a promise to the love of her life. Elise moved deeper into the store, past the everyday luxury items toward the high-security cases at the back, where the truly extraordinary pieces waited. Thomas Wade had worked at Lumina for 15 years and prided himself on his ability to spot a serious buyer within seconds. The woman who had just walked in, plain clothes, no designer handbag, minimal makeup, was definitely not a serious buyer. Probably some middle-class dreamer wanting to gawk at what she could never afford. He'd seen her type before. "New window shopper at 2 o'clock, he murmured to Veronica Pierce, the store manager, who responded with a barely perceptible nod. "I'll keep an eye on her," Veronica replied. "The Blakes should be arriving soon for their appointment. You handle them, I'll make sure our visitor doesn't waste too much time." Elise approached the first display case, admiring a collection of sapphire pieces. When she looked up expectantly at Thomas, he deliberately turned away, straightening items that didn't need straightening. She moved to another case, where exquisite emerald earrings caught her eye. "Excuse me," she said politely. "Could I see these, please?" Thomas glanced over his shoulder. "Those particular pieces are part of our exclusive collection. They start at 50,000. His tone carried the clear implication, "Out of your league." "I understand," Elise replied calmly. "I'd still like to see them." Before Thomas could respond, the door chimed again. He immediately brightened, his entire demeanor transforming as Richard and Olivia Blake swept in. Richard, a venture capitalist known for his ruthless business tactics and generous spending, wore his usual power suit. Olivia, his third wife, younger by 2 decades, wore designer everything, her fingers already laden with diamonds. "Mr. and Mrs. Blake. Wonderful to see you again," Thomas practically purred, abandoning Elise mid-conversation. "We have those special pieces ready for your viewing." Veronica materialized from her office, her professional smile firmly in place. "Olivia, darling. That Hermes bag is divine on you. Come, we've set up the private showing room." Elise watched the performance with quiet interest. She noticed a younger associate, black, like herself, with a nameplate reading Aisha, looking uncomfortable at the situation. Their eyes met briefly, and Aisha offered a small, apologetic smile before quickly looking away. The Blakes were ushered past the main display area toward a doorway draped in velvet. As they passed Elise, Olivia gave her a cursory glance, the kind one might give to furniture rather than a person, before continuing her animated chat with Veronica about her recent trip to Monaco. Elise continued browsing, moving toward the higher-end pieces. Each time she showed interest in something, sales associates mysteriously became busy or disappeared altogether. One even suggested she might be more comfortable looking at the silver collection near the front. After 20 minutes of this treatment, Elise stood before a display of particularly stunning diamond necklaces. These weren't merely expensive, they were investment pieces, the kind that appeared in auction houses and museum exhibitions. She stood admiring one particular piece, a waterfall of diamonds with a rare blue diamond as its centerpiece. Behind the counter, Thomas was showing a men's watch collection to a white customer who had entered after her. Elise waited patiently for him to finish, but when he did, he simply moved on to another display without acknowledging her. "I've been waiting to see this piece," she said firmly, pointing to the blue diamond necklace. Thomas finally looked at her, his smile not reaching his eyes. "That particular piece is by appointment only. It's 7 figures." "I don't recall seeing a sign stating that," Elise replied evenly. From across the store, Veronica emerged from the private showing room, leaving the Blakes to Thomas's attentions. She approached with the practiced smile of someone about to deliver a polite dismissal. "Is there something I can help you with?" Veronica asked, her tone suggesting the only help Elise needed was directions to the exit. "I was interested in seeing this necklace," Elise repeated, gesturing toward the blue diamond piece. Veronica's smile tightened. "That's the Azure Empress. It's part of our heritage collection, reserved for our established clientele." She emphasized the word established in a way that clearly communicated Elise didn't qualify. "Perhaps I could show you something more suitable." Elise recognized the code word. Suitable meant affordable, in the sales associate's estimation. She'd heard similar suggestions throughout her life, even after Johnson Tech had made her and Marcus wealthy beyond imagination. It was one of the reasons they had kept their wealth relatively private, preferring to be judged on character rather than bank balance. From the private viewing room, laughter erupted. The Blakes emerged, Olivia now wearing what appeared to be a new tennis bracelet that caught the light with each dramatic gesture of her hand. "Simply perfect," Olivia declared loudly. "Richard, darling, Veronica has outdone herself with this selection." Richard nodded absently, his attention on his phone, likely checking stock prices. "Whatever makes you happy, dear. Put it on our account, Thomas." Thomas beamed. "Of course, Mr. Blake. And may I say, Mrs. Blake, that piece was made for you." Elise watched the interaction with interest. The Blakes represented exactly the type of ostentatious wealth display that she and Marcus had always avoided. In the tech world, Marcus had been known for wearing the same style of simple button-downs and slacks to board meetings that he'd worn when they started the company in their garage. The code matters more than the clothes, he'd always said. The young associate, Aisha, had finished with another customer and was arranging a display near Elise. She glanced over apologetically. "I'm sorry about the wait," she said quietly. "Can I help you with something?" Before Elise could answer, Veronica swooped in. "Aisha, I need you to restock the gift boxes in the back." Her tone left no room for argument. Aisha hesitated, looking between Veronica and Elise. "I was just, now, please," Veronica insisted. "I'll take care of this, customer." The pause before customer was slight but unmistakable. Aisha reluctantly retreated, casting a final apologetic glance at Elise. Olivia Blake, still admiring her new bracelet, happened to look over and catch Elise's eye. A flash of recognition crossed her face, not of Elise personally, but of the type of person she perceived Elise to be. Olivia leaned toward her husband and whispered something that made him glance over. "Veronica," Olivia called out, her voice carrying deliberately through the store. "Is everything all right over there?" "Perfectly fine, Mrs. Blake," Veronica assured her with a professional smile. "Just helping someone find their way." The implication was clear: Elise didn't belong here and needed to be guided elsewhere. It was a familiar subtext to Elise, who had navigated predominantly white, wealthy spaces throughout her business career. Early in their marriage, she and Marcus had been mistaken for wait staff at their own company's first major investor dinner. Richard Blake was now openly staring, with the entitled curiosity of someone accustomed to his wealth granting him permission to be rude. "Haven't I seen you somewhere before?" he asked Elise directly, surprising both Veronica and his wife. Elise smiled politely. "I don't believe we've met, Mr. Blake." "Richard," Olivia tugged at his sleeve. "Our lunch reservation." Richard continued to look at Elise thoughtfully. "Your face is familiar. Are you perhaps with one of the downtown foundations? My wife sits on several charity boards." The assumption that she could only be present in his world through charity work was another familiar slight. Before Johnson Tech, when she had been an engineer at a major tech firm, male executives had regularly mistaken her for administrative staff despite her credentials. "No," Elise said simply. "I'm just here to purchase some jewelry." Olivia laughed lightly. "Well, good luck with that." She turned to Thomas. "We really must be going. The country club has that new chef we've been dying to try." As the Blakes prepared to leave, Elise noticed Aisha had returned to the floor and was hovering nearby, clearly interested in helping but hesitant to defy Veronica again. Thomas was escorting the Blakes to the door with effusive thanks and promises to call them when the new collection arrived from Paris. Elise took a deep breath. She had promised Marcus she would do this, and she intended to keep that promise. The dismissive treatment was nothing new, but today it felt like a test. Would she assert herself or walk away? Marcus would have encouraged the former with his signature wink and the phrase that had become their private motto as they built their company: "Show them what they're missing by judging the book by its cover." After the Blakes departed, the atmosphere in the store settled back into its usual hushed elegance. Veronica disappeared into her office, leaving Thomas to reorganize displays disturbed during the Blakes' enthusiastic shopping spree. Elise remained standing before the case containing the Azure Empress, patiently waiting for acknowledgement that seemed unlikely to come. Aisha glanced repeatedly between Elise and the other associates, visibly uncomfortable with the situation. Finally, after checking that Veronica's door was closed, she approached Elise with a genuine smile. "I'm so sorry about the wait," she said quietly. "I'd be happy to help you now. I'm Aisha." Elise's expression warmed. "Thank you, Aisha. I'm Elise Johnson." "What were you interested in seeing today, Ms. Johnson?" "Please, call me Elise," she replied. "I'd like to see the Azure Empress necklace." Aisha's eyes widened slightly. The piece was indeed exceptional, and exceptionally expensive. But unlike her colleagues, she didn't immediately assume Elise couldn't afford it. She nodded and retrieved the special keys from beneath the counter. "It's a truly remarkable piece," Aisha explained as she carefully unlocked the case. "The center stone is a natural blue diamond, just over 5 carats. The surrounding white diamonds are all flawless. It was designed by Maurice Laurent exclusively for Lumineux." As Aisha gently lifted the necklace from its display, Thomas noticed what was happening and quickly approached. "Aisha," he interrupted sharply. "What do you think you're doing?" Aisha straightened her shoulders. "Helping a customer, Mr. Wade." "That piece is by appointment only," he said through clenched teeth, forcing a smile in Elise's direction. "Perhaps we could show you something more appropriate." There was that word again, a variation on suitable. Elise had heard it her entire life, from shopping in high-end stores to attending executive meetings. The subtle linguistic barriers erected to remind her of her perceived place. "Aisha was kind enough to assist me," Elise replied calmly. "I specifically came today to see pieces of this caliber." Thomas looked between the necklace and Elise with poorly disguised skepticism. "This particular piece starts at $2.3 million. We typically reserve showings for clients with established purchasing histories." Elise nodded understandingly. "And how does one establish such a history without being shown the pieces?" The question hung in the air, highlighting the circular logic of exclusion. Thomas seemed momentarily flustered before regaining his composure. "Veronica would need to approve any showing of the Heritage Collection to a new client. I'm sure you understand, security protocols." As if summoned by her name, Veronica emerged from her office, immediately noticing the Azure Empress in Aisha's hands and Elise standing expectantly before the counter. Her expression shifted from surprise to displeasure in an instant. "Aisha," she called sharply. "May I speak with you for a moment?" Aisha carefully placed the necklace back in its display, casting an apologetic glance at Elise before following Veronica to a corner of the store. Though they spoke in hushed tones, the tension in their body language was apparent. Veronica gesturing emphatically, Aisha nodding reluctantly. Elise remained where she stood, outwardly composed but inwardly reflecting on how familiar this scene was. How many times had she watched someone being reprimanded for treating her with basic dignity? In boardrooms, at fundraisers, in luxury stores across the country. Before Marcus's success had become public knowledge, and sometimes even after. Thomas cleared his throat. "While we sort this out, perhaps you'd like to see our silver collection? We have some lovely pieces that—" "No, thank you," Elise interrupted politely but firmly. "I'll wait." Her quiet confidence seemed to unsettle him. People who could be dismissed didn't typically stand their ground with such certainty. He retreated to another counter, pretending to arrange displays while keeping a watchful eye on her. Aisha returned, her expression professional but her eyes conveying apology. "I'm sorry for the confusion, Ms. Johnson. Ms. Pierce has reminded me that our Heritage Collection requires appointment viewing. However, I'd be happy to show you other collections that are quite special." Elise could see the genuine discomfort in Aisha's eyes. This young woman was caught between doing her job properly and following the biased instructions of her superiors. It was a position Elise had witnessed countless times throughout her career, and had experienced herself before she and Marcus had built their company. "I understand, Aisha," Elise said gently. "But I specifically came to see your finest pieces today. It's a special occasion for me." Veronica, who had been hovering nearby, stepped forward. "Perhaps I can explain our policy more clearly," she said with a tight smile. "Our Heritage Collection pieces are investments, not merely jewelry. We carefully vet potential buyers to ensure these treasures find appropriate homes." The implication was clear: Elisa's home was not deemed appropriate for such treasures. The familiar sting of prejudgment washed over her, but years of navigating corporate America had taught her how to respond without revealing her feelings. "I'm fully aware of the investment value of fine jewelry," Elise replied evenly. "And I assure you, I didn't wander in here by accident." Veronica's smile didn't waver, but her eyes hardened. "Of course not. But perhaps if you made an appointment and brought along your financial advisor, we could better accommodate your interests. Thomas had sidled closer, clearly enjoying the exchange. We find that proper preparation ensures a more satisfying experience for everyone involved, he added with false helpfulness. Elise noticed that through the store's front windows, the Blakes had paused on the sidewalk outside. Richard appeared to be looking back at her with unusual interest while Olivia checked her reflection in the window. I don't require a financial advisor to make my purchasing decisions, Elise stated calmly. What I do require is the professional courtesy you extend to your other customers. Veronica's composure slipped slightly. Ms. Johnson. Elise Johnson. Ms. Johnson, Veronica continued, we pride ourselves on offering exemplary service to all our visitors. However, certain collections do require additional protocols. Protocols that seem remarkably flexible for some customers and rigidly enforced for others, Elise observed. Thomas stepped forward. I've worked here for 15 years, he said with barely concealed condescension. You develop an instinct for who's here to seriously shop and who's just browsing. There it was, the admission of prejudgment based on appearance. Elise had heard variations of this statement throughout her life, well before she and Marcus had acquired wealth. The assumption that someone who looked like her couldn't possibly belong in spaces of luxury and privilege. And what exactly does a serious shopper look like, Mr. Wade? Elise asked, her voice steady despite the familiar frustration building inside her. Thomas glanced uncomfortably at Veronica, suddenly aware he might have overstepped. Aisha stood slightly apart, her discomfort with the situation evident in her rigid posture. Perhaps we've gotten off on the wrong foot, Veronica interjected smoothly. Aisha can show you our premium collection, which has some truly lovely pieces in a more accessible price range. Elise raised an eyebrow. And what price range do you assume is accessible to me, Ms. Pierce? Outside, the Blakes had now re-entered the store, with Richard leading the way. Something about Elise had clearly caught his attention enough to delay their lunch plans. Richard Blake approached with the confident stride of a man accustomed to commanding rooms. His wife Olivia followed, curiosity and something like suspicion playing across her features. Veronica immediately pivoted toward them, her professional smile reinstated. Mr. and Mrs. Blake. Did you forget something? Richard ignored her, focusing instead on Elise. I knew I recognized you, he said, studying her face. Johnson, not related to Marcus Johnson by any chance. The atmosphere in the store shifted perceptibly. Thomas and Veronica exchanged quick glances as Elise turned to face Richard fully. Yes, she replied simply. Marcus was my husband. Richard's expression transformed to one of genuine respect, a stark contrast to the dismissive glances from earlier. Marcus Johnson of Johnson Tech. The encryption pioneer. The same, Elise confirmed. Olivia stepped forward now, her jewelry jangling. Richard, darling, who is Marcus Johnson? Only one of the most brilliant minds in cybersecurity, Richard explained, his tone reverent. His company's encryption protocols are used by half the Fortune 500. We use them ourselves. He extended his hand to Elise. I had the pleasure of meeting Marcus at a tech conference years ago. Brilliant man. I was sorry to hear of his passing. Veronica and Thomas had gone completely still, processing this new information. Aisha looked confused but intrigued. Thank you, Elise said, shaking Richard's hand. It's been 6 months now. And you're? Richard hesitated. Co-founder and current CEO of Johnson Tech, Elise finished for him. Marcus and I built the company together. The silence that followed was deafening. Veronica's complexion had paled significantly, while Thomas looked as though he might be ill. The name Johnson Tech carried significant weight in business circles. The company's valuation had last been reported at over $8 billion. Well, Richard said with a laugh, I suspect you won't have any trouble affording whatever catches your eye here. Olivia, quickly recalibrating her assessment of Elise, stepped forward with a newly warm smile. I absolutely adore your simplicity, she said, struggling to compliment a tire she had clearly dismissed minutes earlier. "So refreshing in our circles, don't you think, Richard?" Richard, more genuine in his response, nodded. Marcus was known for his unpretentiousness. Wore the same style of button-down to board meetings that he wore when coding in his garage. "I always admired that about him." "Thank you," Elise replied. "We both believe that character speaks louder than clothing." Veronica had recovered enough to attempt damage control. "Ms. Johnson, please accept my sincerest apologies for any misunderstanding. Had we known who you were, that's precisely the problem, isn't it?" Elise interrupted gently. "That I should be treated differently based on who you believe me to be, rather than with basic courtesy regardless." Thomas stepped forward, his demeanor completely transformed. "Allow me to personally show you the Azure Empress, Ms. Johnson. It's truly a piece worthy of your consideration." Elise turned to him with a level gaze. "Actually, I'd prefer to continue working with Aisha. She was kind enough to help me before knowing anything about my name or company." Aisha's eyes widened in surprise. Veronica looked like she wanted to object but couldn't find a professional way to do so. "Richard, we really should get to our lunch reservation," Olivia interjected, clearly calculating that aligning themselves with Elise might be advantageous but wasn't worth missing their social engagement. Richard nodded reluctantly. "Of course. Ms. Johnson, it was a pleasure to meet you properly. If Johnson Tech is ever considering new investment partners, I'd be honored to have a conversation." He handed her his business card before allowing Olivia to guide him toward the exit. As the Blakes departed, the dynamic in the store had completely shifted. Veronica was now hovering anxiously, Thomas was attempting to look busy while staying within earshot, and Aisha approached with newfound confidence. "I'd be happy to show you the Azure Empress now, Ms. Johnson," she said. "And any other pieces that interest you." Elise smiled warmly at her. "Thank you, Aisha. And while we're at it, I'd like to see your most exclusive collection." "All of it." Veronica stepped forward. "I'll call Mr. Porter, the owner. He'll want to personally assist with such an important client." "That won't be necessary," Elise replied calmly. "Aisha is doing just fine." As Aisha retrieved the keys again, Elise noticed Thomas whispering urgently to Veronica, likely sharing whatever he knew about Johnson Tech's valuation. Veronica's eyes grew wider as he spoke. Elise turned back to the display case, her thoughts drifting to Marcus. "Sometimes it's okay to want something beautiful just because it brings you joy," he had said. Today she would honor that sentiment, and perhaps teach a small lesson about judging books by their covers in the process. With Aisha's assistance, Elise began examining the Azure Empress necklace more closely. The young sales associate handled the piece with reverence, explaining its features with genuine enthusiasm rather than the rehearsed pitch Elise had heard Thomas using with the Blakes. "The center stone is extraordinarily rare," Aisha explained. "Natural blue diamonds of this size appear maybe once in a generation. The setting was designed to allow light to pass through from all angles, enhancing its natural color." Elise nodded appreciatively, remembering Marcus's fascination with rare materials. During the early days of Johnson Tech, when they were still operating from their garage, he'd explained encryption algorithms to investors using the metaphor of rare gems, common information transformed into something precious and protected. "It's beautiful," Elise agreed. "I'd like to see more from this collection." As Aisha eagerly retrieved additional pieces, Elise noticed Veronica on the phone in her office, gesticulating animatedly. Through the glass walls, she could see the manager's expression shift from anxiety to relief. Thomas hovered nearby, trying to appear busy while clearly eavesdropping on Elise's conversation with Aisha. After examining several more pieces, Elise reached for her phone. "I should consult with my daughter before making final decisions. She's expecting my call." "Of course," Aisha replied. "Would you like some privacy?" "That won't be necessary. This won't take long." Elise dialed, and after 2 rings, her daughter's voice answered. "Mom. How's Operation Sparkle going?" Elise smiled at their code name for today's shopping expedition. It's going, interestingly. I've found several pieces that are quite remarkable. Dad would be proud, Zoe replied, her voice warm with emotion despite the professional tone she maintained as co-CEO of Johnson Tech. At 26, Zoe had inherited her father's technical brilliance and her mother's quiet strength. Are they treating you well? Elise glanced at Thomas, who was now pretending to polish a watch display while straining to hear her conversation. There was some hesitation at first. But things have improved. Let me guess, they didn't think you belonged until someone recognized you. The edge in Zoe's voice was familiar. As a young black woman in tech, she'd faced her own versions of the prejudice Elise had navigated for decades. Something like that, Elise confirmed. I'm looking at a particular necklace, the Azure Empress. Blue diamond, about 5 carats, surrounded by white diamonds. Classic setting, but remarkable stones. Sounds perfect for the foundation gala next month, Zoe replied. What's the damage? Just over 2 million. I'm also considering several other pieces. There was a pause on the other end. Several. Mom, when Dad said to buy yourself something special, I don't think he meant clean out the store. The amusement in her voice was clear. Your father always said to invest in things that bring joy, Elise reminded her. And after today's experience, I find myself wanting to make quite a statement. Zoe laughed. I know that tone. Someone's about to learn a valuable lesson, aren't they? Perhaps, Elise admitted. Are you still in the meeting with the Tokyo team? Just wrapped up. I could join you in about 30 minutes if you'd like a second opinion. Elise noticed Veronica emerging from her office, looking considerably more composed. That would be wonderful, darling. Great. And Mom? Make them sweat a little. Elise smiled as she ended the call. Aisha was waiting patiently with another tray of extraordinary pieces, a diamond and ruby bracelet that resembled a cascade of fire, and earrings with pear-shaped yellow diamonds that caught the light magnificently. Your daughter will be joining us shortly, Elise informed her. In the meantime, I'd like to see those emerald earrings I noticed earlier. Absolutely, Aisha replied enthusiastically. They're part of our Verdant Dreams collection. Veronica approached, her demeanor now entirely transformed. Gone was the condescending smile, replaced by genuine, if belated, professional courtesy. Ms. Johnson, I've just spoken with Mr. Porter, the owner. He's on his way to personally assist you. He's absolutely thrilled you've chosen Lumino for your special purchase. How kind, Elise replied neutrally. Though Aisha has been doing an excellent job. I'd prefer to continue working with her. Veronica's smile faltered slightly. Of course, but Mr. Porter insisted. For a client of your caliber, he feels it's appropriate he be here personally. Richard Blake hadn't gone to lunch after all. To Olivia's visible annoyance, he had returned to Lumina Jewelers, this time without his wife. He entered the store with purpose, spotting Elise still working with Aisha at the high-security display cases. Ms. Johnson, he called as he approached. I hope I'm not interrupting. Elise turned, surprised to see the venture capitalist back so soon. Mr. Blake. I thought you had a lunch reservation. Some opportunities are worth canceling plans for, he replied with a businessman's directness. I sent Olivia ahead. I wanted to speak with you privately. Veronica immediately materialized beside them. Mr. Blake, always a pleasure to have you back. Would you like something from our private collection? Richard waved her away. I'm here to speak with Ms. Johnson, thank you. Veronica retreated, confusion evident on her face. Thomas watched the interaction from across the store, his expression equally perplexed by this unexpected alliance. I knew I recognized you, Richard continued, addressing Elise. Your company's work is revolutionary. I tried to get a meeting with Marcus for years, but Johnson Tech was famously selective about its investors and partners. Elise nodded. We preferred to grow organically when possible. Marcus believed that too many investors meant too many people trying to steer the ship. A wise philosophy, given your success, Richard acknowledged. I was shocked when I realized who you were, especially after watching how you were treated when you first arrived. He lowered his voice. This isn't the first time I've seen this establishment make assumptions about potential customers based on appearance. Elise raised an eyebrow, surprised by his candor. Yet you continue to patronize them? Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. Olivia prefers their selection. But I've spoken to James, Mr. Porter, the owner, about it before. It appears the message hasn't filtered down to all his staff. Aisha, who had been arranging the emerald earrings in their display, looked uncomfortable at this frank discussion of the store's biases. Elise noticed and smiled reassuringly at her. Aisha has been wonderful, she said deliberately, loud enough for Veronica to hear from where she hovered nearby. A true professional. Richard nodded approvingly at the young sales associate. I'm glad to hear it. He turned back to Elise. The actual reason I returned was to invite you to the Tech Investment Forum next month. We'd be honored to have Johnson Tech represented. Before Elise could respond, the store's front door opened again. An elegant black woman in her 20s entered, her simple linen pantsuit and minimal jewelry echoing Elise's understated style. Despite her youth, she carried herself with unmistakable confidence. Mom, she called warmly, crossing the store with purposeful strides. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was terrible. Zoe, Elise smiled, embracing her daughter. Perfect timing. Mr. Blake, allow me to introduce my daughter, Zoe Johnson. Co-CEO of Johnson Tech. Richard's eyes widened with genuine surprise and admiration. Co-CEO. Impressive for someone so young. Zoe shook his hand firmly. My father believed talent shouldn't wait for arbitrary timelines. I've been coding since I was 9 and joined the company officially at 19. MIT graduate, if I recall from industry profiles? Richard asked. Double major in computer science and mathematics, Zoe confirmed. Though the real education was watching my parents build something meaningful from nothing. Veronica and Thomas had now both gravitated toward the group, magnetized by the revelation that not one but two major tech executives were in their store. The transformation in their demeanor was remarkable, from dismissive to deferential in the space of an hour. Ms. Johnson, the younger Ms. Johnson, Veronica began awkwardly. Can I offer you some champagne while you help your mother select her purchases? Zoe declined with a polite but cool smile. No, thank you. I'd rather focus on these beautiful pieces my mother is considering. She turned to examine the Azure Empress necklace, which Aisha had laid out alongside the emerald earrings and ruby bracelet. Her expression softened as she touched the blue diamond centerpiece. Dad would have loved this, she said quietly to Elise. It reminds me of the blue glass paperweight he kept on his desk, the one from your first office. Elise nodded, remembering the cheap souvenir they'd bought to celebrate leasing their first real office space after years in a garage. That's exactly why it caught my eye. Richard, sensing the personal moment, began to step away. I should let you get back to your shopping. But please, consider my invitation to the forum. We need more voices like Johnson Tech's in the conversation. As he turned to leave, the store's front door opened yet again. A distinguished man in his 60s entered, slightly out of breath as if he'd rushed over. James Porter, owner of Lumino Jewelers, had arrived. James Porter surveyed his store quickly, his experienced gaze immediately locking on the small gathering around the Heritage Collection displays. He straightened his already impeccable tie and approached with the confident stride of someone used to dealing with wealth and power. Ms. Johnson, he said warmly, extending his hand to Elise. James Porter. I cannot tell you what an honor it is to welcome you to Lumino. I deeply admired your husband's work. His innovations transformed not just technology but our very concept of digital security. Elise shook his hand, noting the genuine respect in his voice that had been absent from his employees' earlier interactions. Thank you, Mr. Porter. Marcus would have appreciated that. James, please, he insisted, before turning to Zoe. And Ms. Johnson the younger. I've read about your contributions to Johnson Tech's latest encryption protocols. Remarkable work for someone of any age, let alone someone so young. Zoe accepted the compliment with a gracious nod. Richard Blake used the moment to excuse himself, slipping Porter his card with a murmured request to discuss their mutual interests later. Once Richard had departed, Porter's expression became more serious. I understand there may have been some misunderstandings earlier today. Please accept my personal apologies. Lumino prides itself on treating every visitor with respect and dignity. Elise noted that Veronica and Thomas had retreated to a respectful distance, both looking distinctly uncomfortable. Aisha remained nearby, still assisting with displaying the selected pieces. The only true dignity is treating people well regardless of their perceived status or wealth, Elise replied evenly. Your young associate Aisha understood that instinctively. Porter glanced at Aisha with new interest. I'm pleased to hear it. Perhaps you could share more details about your experience today. I assure you, any lapses in our service standards will be addressed. Zoe stepped in, her tone protective. Today is a special day for my mother, Mr. Porter. Perhaps that conversation could happen another time. Of course, Porter agreed quickly. Today should be about celebration and beauty. He gestured to the displayed pieces. I see you found some of our most exceptional treasures. The Azure Empress is truly one of a kind. Elise nodded, remembering a conversation with Marcus during their 20th anniversary dinner. They had discussed legacy, not the technological one that Johnson Tech would leave, but the personal one they hoped to create through their foundation's work and their example to Zoe. My husband believed that true value wasn't in possessions but in purpose, Elise said, lifting the blue diamond necklace carefully. But he also understood that beautiful things can have meaning beyond their price tag. Porter nodded appreciatively. The finest pieces always tell a story. The blue diamond in the Empress has quite a remarkable journey, mined in South Africa, cut in Amsterdam, and eventually set by our master jeweler right here in the States. Speaking of stories, Zoe added, I notice you have several pieces from the Verdant Dreams collection. The emeralds are Colombian? Indeed they are, Porter confirmed, clearly impressed by her knowledge. From the Muso mines, known for their perfect color and clarity. As they continued discussing the jewelry, Elise noticed Veronica shepherding Thomas into her office, their hushed but intense conversation visible through the glass walls. Their body language spoke volumes, Veronica gesturing emphatically while Thomas looked increasingly defensive. Porter followed her gaze and his expression tightened momentarily before he turned back with a professional smile. Now, Ms. Johnson, beyond these pieces, was there anything else that caught your eye today? Our collection is extensive, and it would be my pleasure to show you items that might not be on display. Actually, Elise said thoughtfully, I'm interested in seeing your entire heritage collection. Today is special, it would have been Marcus's and my 25th wedding anniversary. I made him a promise that I intend to keep. Porter's eyes widened slightly at the implication of such a large potential purchase, but he recovered quickly. It would be our honor to present the complete collection. Shall we use the private viewing room? I'll have champagne brought in. Zoe exchanged a glance with her mother, a silent communication born of years of attending business meetings together. That sounds perfect, she confirmed. Though I'd like to request that Aisha continue to assist us. She's been exceptionally helpful. Of course, Porter agreed readily, though his quick glance toward Veronica's office suggested he was making mental notes about his staff's behavior. Aisha, please prepare the heritage collection for viewing in our private salon. As Aisha hurried to fulfill the request, Porter leaned closer to Elise. I understand completely about anniversaries and promises. My late wife and I shared 37 years together. Each anniversary, even now, I honor her with a special gesture. The personal disclosure seemed genuine, and Elise felt her opinion of the owner softened slightly. Marcus always said life is too short for grudges but too precious for false niceties. A wise man, Porter acknowledged. Now, shall we proceed to the viewing room? I believe you'll find what awaits you truly spectacular. The private viewing room at Lumineux resembled a luxurious sitting room more than a retail space. Plush velvet chairs surrounded an elegantly simple table, and lighting had been specially designed to showcase jewelry to its best advantage. As Elise and Zoe settled in, Porter personally supervised Aisha and two other associates as they brought in tray after tray of extraordinary pieces. The complete heritage collection, Porter announced proudly. 37 pieces representing the finest examples of jewelry artistry in the world. Elise surveyed the display with genuine appreciation. Beyond the Azure Empress necklace she'd already admired, there were bracelets with rare colored diamonds, Art Deco-inspired earrings with perfect symmetry, and rings featuring stones of exceptional quality and size. These are truly remarkable, she acknowledged, selecting a bracelet with alternating sapphires and diamonds. This reminds me of the night sky above our first apartment. Marcus and I used to sit on the fire escape and talk about our dreams. Zoe watched her mother with a mixture of affection and understanding. Dad always said you were his guiding star. Aisha, who had been arranging the next display, smiled at the sentiment. Porter had positioned himself at a respectful distance, allowing the mother and daughter space while remaining available to answer questions. Elise examined a pair of earrings featuring pear-shaped emeralds surrounded by diamonds. Marcus bought me emerald studs for our first anniversary, she recalled. Nothing fancy, we were still struggling to make rent while building the company. But he remembered I'd admired them in a department store window. That sounds like Dad, Zoe agreed. Always noticing the little things. As Elise continued selecting pieces that resonated with her memories, the collection on the interested side of the table grew steadily larger. Porter's professional demeanor couldn't entirely mask his growing excitement at what was becoming one of the largest sales in the store's history. Thomas appeared at the door, clearly having been sent by Veronica to assess the situation. His expression upon seeing the number of pieces Elise was considering was almost comical in its shock. Ms. Pierce wanted me to check if you needed anything, he offered, his earlier condescension replaced by eager servility. We're being well taken care of by Aisha and Mr. Porter, Elise replied evenly. Thank you. Dismissal clear in her tone, Thomas retreated, but not before Elise caught him mouthing, 7 pieces, to someone in the main store area. Porter cleared his throat. Ms. Johnson, might I ask which pieces you're leaning toward? Each tells its own unique story, and I'd be happy to share more about their provenance or design inspiration. Elise looked at the substantial collection she had set aside, the Azure Empress necklace, the emerald earrings, the sapphire bracelet, a substantial diamond cocktail ring, a platinum and ruby collar, diamond drop earrings, and a delicate gold bangle adorned with rare pink diamonds. Actually, she said thoughtfully, I believe I've made my decisions. Porter nodded eagerly. Excellent. Which piece speaks to you most strongly? All of them, Elise replied simply. The room fell silent. Even Zoe looked surprised, though she quickly masked it with a smile. All, 7 pieces. Porter clarified, his professional composure slipping momentarily to reveal genuine astonishment. Yes, Elise confirmed. The Azure Empress reminds me of the blue glass paperweight from our first office. The emerald earrings evoke our first anniversary. The sapphire bracelet reflects the night sky above our apartment where we planned our dreams. The diamond ring is for the birth of Zoe, the brightest moment of our lives. The ruby collar represents the passion Marcus brought to everything he did. The diamond earrings match a tie pin I gave him when we went public. And the pink diamond bangle. She paused, emotion briefly overcoming her. Pink was the color of the roses he gave me on our last anniversary before his diagnosis. Zoe reached over to squeeze her mother's hand, her own eyes glistening with emotion. Porter seemed momentarily speechless, moved by the personal significance behind each selection. Ms. Johnson, it would be Luminua's honor to help you commemorate these precious memories. There's one more thing, Elise added. I'd also like to purchase a selection of pieces for my daughter. Zoe started to protest, but Elise held up a hand. Your father wanted this day to be special. He'd want you included. As Aisha began displaying additional pieces suitable for a younger wearer, Thomas reappeared at the doorway, this time with Veronica beside him. Both wore expressions of studied professionalism that couldn't quite mask their shock at the unfolding sale. "Ms. Pierce," Porter acknowledged coolly. "I believe we'll need the special packaging for multiple Heritage Collection pieces. Ms. Johnson has made her selections." Veronica nodded quickly. "Of course. I'll see to it immediately." As they continued with the selection process for Zoe's pieces, the atmosphere in the store had transformed completely. What had begun with dismissal and prejudice was ending with one of the most significant sales in Luminua's history, all because one associate had chosen basic respect over appearance-based judgment. As Aisha and Porter carefully arranged for the proper documentation of Elisa's selections, the store's front door chimed again. Several heads turned to see a small group of people entering, including a professional photographer and what appeared to be a journalist with a notebook. Richard Blake accompanied them, looking pleased with himself. "Ms. Johnson," he called out, approaching the private viewing room. "I hope you don't mind. When I mentioned to a few friends at the Business Journal that Johnson Tech's leadership was making a significant purchase at Luminu, they expressed interest in featuring it in their Legacy Leaders section." Elise raised an eyebrow at this unexpected development. "Mr. Blake, I don't recall discussing publicity." Richard had the grace to look slightly abashed. "A presumption on my part, I admit. But the journal has been trying to feature Johnson Tech for years. Your company's dedication to privacy has made you something of a white whale for business publications." Zoe stepped forward protectively. "And today remains a private family commemoration, not a media opportunity." The journalist, sensing rejection, began to retreat, but Elise held up a hand. "Actually," she said thoughtfully, "perhaps a brief feature would be appropriate, with conditions." Porter looked between them curiously. "Luminu would be honored to accommodate any press coverage you deem suitable, Ms. Johnson." "My condition is this," Elise continued. "The story must focus not on the purchase amount, but on customer service and the importance of treating all clients with equal respect regardless of appearance or assumptions." The journalist perked up. "That's actually a more interesting angle than, tech executive buys expensive jewelry." "I'd also like to highlight the associate who exemplified this principle today," Elise added, gesturing to Aisha, whose eyes widened in surprise. In an industry where first impressions often determine service quality, her professionalism stood out. Veronica and Thomas, hovering at the edges of the gathering, exchanged uncomfortable glances. Porter, however, nodded approvingly. "Luminu is committed to learning and growing," he stated firmly. "While I regret that your initial experience didn't reflect our values, I appreciate the opportunity to demonstrate our commitment to improvement." As the discussion continued, Elise noticed a small crowd gathering outside the store's windows. Word had apparently spread quickly about the extraordinary sale taking place inside. Among the curious onlookers, she spotted a familiar face. Olivia Blake had returned, clearly drawn by the commotion her husband had helped create. "It seems we've attracted some attention," Zoe noted dryly. Elise smiled. "Your father would have hated this part. He always preferred to let our work speak for itself." "That's why you're the public face of Johnson Tech," Zoe reminded her. "Dad built the systems, but you built the relationships." Porter approached with several velvet boxes containing Elisa's selections. "Everything has been prepared according to your specifications, Ms. Johnson. The insurance documentation is complete, and we can arrange secure delivery to your home if you prefer." "That won't be necessary," Elise replied. "I came prepared for this purchase." She nodded to Zoe, who retrieved a leather portfolio from her handbag. From it, she produced documentation that made Porter's eyes widen slightly. "A banker's draft for the full amount," Zoe explained. "We anticipated making a significant purchase today." The total, visible to those standing nearby, contained more digits than Thomas had likely seen in a single transaction during his 15 years at Luminu. His expression was a mixture of shock and belated regret. As the transaction was finalized, the journalist approached Elise again. "Ms. Johnson, if I may ask, was this purchase planned as a statement, or did today's experience shape your decision?" Elise considered the question. "The purchase itself was planned, a promise kept to my late husband. But its scope may have been influenced by today's interactions. She paused, choosing her words carefully. Sometimes, the most powerful response to being underestimated is simply to exceed expectations so dramatically that it challenges preconceptions. The journalist nodded thoughtfully, jotting notes. And the fact that you specifically requested Aisha continue assisting you? Recognition should follow merit, not assumptions, Elise replied simply. In business and in life. Porter, who had been listening nearby, stepped forward. Ms. Johnson's experience has been illuminating for Lumineux. We pride ourselves on exceptional service, but clearly have work to do in ensuring that standard applies universally. As they spoke, Elise noticed Veronica escorting a visibly upset Thomas toward the back office. The message was clear: there would be consequences for the day's earlier behavior. 1 week later, Elise sat in her office at Johnson Tech headquarters, the Azure Empress necklace gleaming against her simple black dress. The Business Journal article was open on her tablet, the headline reading, "Beyond Appearances, How Johnson Tech CEO's Jewelry Purchase Sparked Conversation About Retail Bias." The piece had been surprisingly thoughtful, focusing less on the multi-million-dollar purchase and more on the broader implications of judgment based on appearance in luxury retail. Aisha had been featured prominently, quoted on the importance of treating all customers with equal respect and dignity. Zoe entered, wearing the emerald earrings Elise had selected for her. "The article's getting traction," she reported. "Over 50,000 shares since this morning." Elise nodded, scrolling through the comments section. The response seems largely positive. Except from Lumineux's competitors, who are falling over themselves to announce diversity training programs, Zoe noted with a hint of amusement. Amazing how quickly change happens when it affects the bottom line. A notification appeared on Elise's screen, an email from James Porter. She opened it and read aloud, "Dear Ms. Johnson, I wanted to update you personally on the changes implemented at Lumineux following your visit. We have instituted mandatory training for all staff on unconscious bias. Additionally, our commission structure has been revised to eliminate incentives that might encourage prejudgment of customers. Veronica Pierce has been reassigned to our corporate training division, where her experience will inform our new protocols. Thomas Wade is no longer with Lumineux." "Consequences," Zoe murmured. "And hopefully growth," Elise added. The postscript is more interesting. Aisha Williams has been promoted to Senior Sales Associate. Her wisdom and integrity represent the values we aspire to embody at Lumineux. Elise closed the email, reflecting on the past week. The jewelry purchased at Lumineux now rested in the company's secure vault, with the exception of the few pieces she and Zoe had chosen to wear today. "Your father would have enjoyed the irony," she said. "He spent his life building systems to protect valuable assets, and here we are using his legacy to make a different kind of statement about value." Zoe smiled. "Dad always said the most valuable systems are the human ones, how we treat each other, who we choose to be when no one important is watching." "Or when we think no one important is watching," Elise corrected gently. She touched the blue diamond at her throat, thinking of Marcus and the journey they had shared, from struggling entrepreneurs to leaders of a technology empire, all while trying to remain true to their values. The purchase at Lumineux had been more than a kept promise. It had been a reminder of something Marcus had often told his development teams: systems reveal their true character not during normal operations, but when tested under unexpected conditions. People, Elise reflected, weren't so different. The true measure wasn't how you treated those you perceived as important, but how you treated everyone before you knew who they might be. She turned back to her work, the weight of the necklace a pleasant reminder of promises kept and lessons delivered. In the end, the jewelry was beautiful, but the real value lay in the principle it had helped illuminate, one far more precious than diamonds, and considerably more enduring. Dear friend, we all deserve to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of how we look or what we wear. This story reminds us that character isn't revealed by expensive clothes or flashy accessories, but by how we treat others, especially when we think no one important is watching. True worth comes from integrity, not appearances. If this message resonated with you, please like this video and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can create a world where people are valued for who they are, not what they seem to be. Your support helps us share more stories that challenge prejudice and celebrate human dignity.